Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Advisory services offered through CreativeOne Wealth, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Prosperity Wealth Management, LLC, and CreativeOne Wealth, LLC are not affiliated. Provided content is for overview and informational purposes only and is not intended and should not be relied upon as individualized tax, legal, fiduciary, or investment advice.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Matthew Gallagher, who's the founder of Prosperity Wealth Management. Matthew, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. So I love when I hear names of companies or programs or packages that people create. There's always a story behind it. So I love the concept of prosperity. So tell me a little bit about how you came up with the name of your company, Prosperity Wealth Management.
Very good question. You know, originally, I actually had a different name for my company for a very short time. And I felt like I was on a trip, and I was just praying about my business, and I felt like the Lord gave me a different name for my company, and the name was Prosperity. And it came from the verse that I was given, was Jeremiah 29:11. Most people know it, where it talks about the Lord says His plans are to prosper us and not to harm us. Yeah, I know the plans I have for you, to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you hope in a future. And I felt like He gave me that name because that was what He wanted me to do, is to help prosper people, to help give them hope in a future through Him. And so, you know, He gave me that name. So when I came back from the trip, I immediately started the process of changing the name, rebranding to Prosperity. And again, with the intention of that is my goal, to help people.
Neat. So I love that. Love the scriptural focus. I want to go deeper on two things that I noticed what you just said there. So first, what kind of a trip was it? Was it a business trip or like a vacation type trip?
It was kind of a combo of both. It was a business trip, but it was like a conference that they had in a location. It was actually a really nice trip that we had, and I was sitting out by a swimming pool. I remember exactly, and I was just praying about the company that I had started and
there's my
point. Direction I needed to take with it.
So there's my point. And so here's from a business coaching, life coaching kind of a concept. I feel like entrepreneurs and business owners and, you know, your clients, you know, you and me, we tend to be tempted to grind and just get her done. But many times it's in the moments of like the vacation, like, yeah, you're on a business trip, but you're out by the pool. You had some downtime. Many times that's when we have these aha moments, and even better when you're being intentional and you're aware of your thoughts, and then you reach out and pray and say, God, I want to be the best person I can be to steward and manage the business you've given me. Give me some direction. And then, oh, here's this verse and here's this thought. So I think that it's so neat to recognize that, you know, yes, we have a big old to-do list that needs to get done, but sometimes we got to just pause and be still and take those moments and then listen. And sometimes, you know, if someone isn't, you know, a praying person, okay, just still take the time and listen, because many times your mind is going 10,000 miles a minute, and it just needs to just be calm and notice maybe some opportunities around you.
Absolutely.
Love it. So give me a little bit of background. What actually got you into the financial services business in the first place?
Well, you know, it's funny because when I went to school, I got my undergrad at Baylor University and went to Notre Dame for my executive management program, and none of that was in finance. That was never my plan. Actually, you know what I wanted to do? I wanted to be a sports agent. That was what I wanted to do. And so that's what I had grown up wanting to be. But I learned, you know, no one ever told me. And I learned as I got into those programs that really to be a sports agent, you have to be a lawyer, because the lawyer is the one drawing up the contracts. So if you're not an attorney and you're a sports agent, then you're not making much of a living, because the attorneys are the ones who are doing all the contracts, and eventually they'll take your clients. And so as I got out of school and decided I didn't want to go down the law path.
Yeah.
I honestly just started trying a couple different things, got some job opportunities, and I ended up getting in the financial services world with Farmers Insurance. I'm sure you're familiar with them.
Sure.
They've got a financial services side as well as an insurance side. So I did really well there, and that's what kind of got me wanting to go down the path of financial services.
Neat. Just slight little pivots and movements and just noticing how, oh, yeah, sports agent might be nice, but if it entails all that, maybe not so much. So that's awesome.
Right.
What kind of clients do you work with now currently? Do you have a specific type of client? You know, like a lot of people might, maybe with your sports background, you might have come, or your sports, thought initially, you might have thought, hey, I work with a lot of athletes. Or maybe do you tend to work with a lot of business owners, or is that a good mix?
It's a mix. I've got clients all across the range of ages, but really kind of my bread and butter of who I work with. And, I started doing this originally. I started in the financial services industry, gosh, it's been 16 years or so. And through that time, really what my bread and butter has become has been pre-retirees and retirees. That's really where I've kind of found a niche to helping people, really helping people sit down as they've built up wealth and they don't know what to do with it. And so sitting down with them and trying to help them have a plan, because the plan is so important for their future, and saying, you've done well building this up, but what do we do now? And a lot of times they don't know, and that's where I come in to help them.
Yeah, and I think that is a head scratcher, because mainly people don't know what to do, but you layer in the extra aspect of there's so much information out there at our fingertips. We hear about news, podcast, online, and they seem to all say different things. So it's like that, it just amplifies the confusion, right?
Well, it's funny because you say that there's so much information out there, and that's so true, of course, as we all know, but that's usually viewed as a good thing. But in retirement planning, it's not necessarily a good thing, because as you just said, to your point, there's so much information out there, but there's a lot of misinformation out there. And you can read one article and you can Google the opposite and find many articles supporting the complete opposite stance on what you just read. And so clients are more confused now with the overflow of information than they've ever been. Yeah. Let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. You're familiar with Mount Everest, right?
Yes.
Okay, you may have heard this fact, but a lot of people die when they attempt to climb Mount Everest. But the fact that I learned a few years back, and you may be familiar with this, is that from what I understand, the majority of people who die climbing Mount Everest die on the way down, not the way up. Die on the way down, because they'll get to a certain point, and the Sherpas that are with them will stop and they'll say, we're not going with you any further. Okay, Mike, we're stopping here. If you want to go on, that's on you, but you do not have the supplies. You do not have enough to make it back down the mountain. And so the goal for so many people is climbing Mount Everest, when that shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be climbing, but getting back down to tell somebody about it. And I like to relate that to financial planning, because so many people have a number in their mind. I need $1 million, Mike. I need $2 million. I need 300,000, whatever that number is for them. If I can just get that, I'll bet I could retire and be happy. And that's just like climbing Mount Everest. They have that goal, but they never planned, once they get to that, how do they come back down? And of course, living in this instance, compared to Mount Everest, would be not running out of money, right? Not spending it all down and realizing when you're in your mid-80s, you're out of money. That would be a horrible situation.
And let's continue with that thought about climbing and Mount Everest and summiting and goals, because you kind of I feel like a lot of the financial planners I talk to, you end up being life coaches, because it's like, well, what do you foresee retirement to be? And let's help you get there. And I think a lot of times people think of, the cliche retirement as I'm just done working and I want to just sit around and do nothing. But that gets bored after about a minute and a half. So when you summit or attain that certain goal, whatever it might be, like achieving that dollar figure, then what? because we are driven beings and we want to achieve a goal, but if we achieve it and then that's it, you're like, oh, well, that's not. And there's a lot of statistics about people that retire that now have no purpose or no, perceived purpose, and they start to decline. So I feel like, hitting that number needs to be, a number, but then that leverages us to be able to do something with it, like helping this or volunteering there or creating a foundation. So how do you work with your clients to help them kind of take those goals and then parlay that into the next goal and the next goal and meeting their financial needs that way?
Sure. It's funny you say that there's so many statistics out there, because you're right, but it's not just statistics. I've witnessed them.
Wow.
I've seen people retire and just quit living life because that was their goal. Once I retire, I'm going to sit around all day, and those people, numerous of them pass away very soon. I believe, and you mentioned this a minute ago, but I personally believe it's because they lose purpose for living. They lose, they don't have those goals. One of the things I encourage people to do, to your question, was to continue on. I've got clients that will retire and then they love sports. We were talking about sports earlier. So they'll go umpire, multiple nights a week just to stay active, to have a purpose, to do something they enjoy. Got a lot of clients who will go, I'll encourage them to go volunteer at their churches, become a, weekly volunteer up there, something that gives them purpose bigger than themselves. Because it's nice in some ways, because some of these things that they're doing, maybe getting a part-time job in a field they've always loved that they never thought they could afford to work in, some of these things they're doing also bring in supplemental income. Yeah. So it helps them not spend down on this money that's sitting there as quickly. But the key is just finding that purpose. If they can find that purpose, and that's one thing I try to talk to them about, if they can do that and they stay active, then 10, 15, 20 years after retirement, they're as healthy as ever.
So you brought up scripture at the beginning. What you just said reminded me of another one. So Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. And I know that it's not the intent of that verse, what we're talking about, probably taken out of context, but it is a statement that makes sense, that if you don't have that vision, that thing to draw you and push you and motivate you and keep things fresh, maybe your, inner person will perish, and not immediately and not like, things like that. But I think that that's a wonderful verse to keep in mind, because scripture does teach that, what's in your heart comes out, and you need to have that goal to drive you and pull you. And, like you mentioned about the sports or the umpire and the kids and the coaching. Wow. You don't take that 6 months off and take the break and relax, but get back to it. What could that be? Maybe it is starting a ministry. Maybe it is starting a foundation, serving. So I think that's such a huge thing there. And talking about, scripture again, talk about the biblical story of building a house on the right kind of foundation.
I will. Well, before I say that, let me throw in one thing. They say great minds think alike. Yeah. The verse you just mentioned, where there is no vision, the people perish. That I actually used that verse in one of the videos I had put out for clients, and talked about what you just said in one of my videos. So, it's great. I do think that's very valid. You were talking about the biblical foundation and how that relates to financial planning. And, I had a book out, and in that book I talked about that. And I say, listen, the story in the Bible, just to sum it up, was, the foolish man built his house on the sand. The storms came, and the house was wiped out. Now, the wise man, everybody has maybe heard the old children's song, or they know, he built on a rock. But, Mike, that's not exactly what it says, if you go back and look it up. It actually says, and I reference this in my book, it says he dug down deep at rock. A lot of people don't even know it says that. They just say, he built on a rock. Well, no, he dug down deep, which implied that, he had to work at it, right? Yeah. He was dedicated. He dug down deep. He hit the rock. He built on the rock. And when I tell people when they're, and this goes back even to my Mount Everest story I was talking about coming back down from that mountain. When you're coming down from that mountain in retirement, when you're preparing your portfolio, you want to have a solid foundation. Just like building, biblically, it was talking about building on a solid foundation. Your financial portfolio needs to be on a solid foundation. Yes. And that can be through numerous means. But my point is, when I sit down with clients, I talk to them about, not everything necessarily needs to be at risk at this moment, especially for many of them in retirement age. We need to look at some strategies that we can put together where we can help protect, to build that foundation of your assets. So if things go wonky with the markets or with other things, and your house seems to be shifting, you've got a solid foundation, your financial house, you've got a solid foundation under it where you don't have to worry about having to go back to work when you're 80.
Yeah.
Or you're going to have to go move in with your kids because the market crashed and you lost most of what you had, or whatever the case is. So that's a very valid and important point you brought up.
Yeah, it really is. And it gets back to risk and volatility. And, you see typically you only see all the success stories out there, like, oh, well, our portfolio returns were, or that's like looking at social media and all your friends like, oh, I've been on this great trip. They only talk about the good things, right? So you have to take that with a grain of salt.
That's a great example, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I'll have people even come in who don't really want to work with me. They'll come in from a seminar, but they're there to tell me how well they've done. I've had that happen before.
Yeah.
And people always tell you the highlights, just like you said with social media. It was a great example.
Yeah.
People always tell you the highlights, but you don't see what happens behind the scenes.
100%. And so how about this? So since we're all into analogies and stories, I think this has been attributed to Warren Buffett, where he said something to the effect of, you will never go broke taking a profit. So when should you sell that stock? Or when should you know what? If you sold it now and you have X% profit, but it could go up, well, it could go down. So you'll never go broke taking a profit and then move on. So take that risk and be careful, because boy, the problem with that lack of solid foundation, with having things that are unproven and untried and a little bit more risky in your portfolio, boy, you really want to have your options open at retirement. You don't want to feel forced to go and work or grind some more. You want to, sit back and enjoy the fruit of your labor over the last few decades. So I would just ask this. Typically, when you're working with your clients, what are you seeing out there? Are they looking for, I just want this certain number to be done and I want it to last X number of years? Or are they looking for something like, I kind of want to throttle back a little and work maybe 2 days a week, but, I don't want to just sit back and do nothing, but I want to take a major break. What are you seeing the sentiment with retirees these days?
I'm seeing a good mix of that. Now, with that said, I do encourage people, like we talked about earlier, to be someone who stays active, to maybe go find, I'll talk to them about what's your passion? What are you passionate about? What do you want to do, now that you're retiring? And a lot of them do have goals. They'll want to travel with their wife. They didn't get this time because they've been working, so many hours over so many years, or go spend time with their grandkids, maybe move closer to their kids or grandkids. So a lot of them do have that. But my encouragement to them is, like I said, to stay active, to get that job a couple days a week in something they enjoy.
Yeah.
I'll have others where they do just have that number in mind, as you mentioned, and then when I get that, I'm done. But again, those people, I see them, and I hate to use this phrase, wither away, but I see it. I watch it as I do the reviews, as I meet with them. The ones that aren't staying active, you can see it in their countenance. You can see it in their physical
like the
health.
sparkle in their eye has just kind of dimmed, and it's not like they literally just wither, but sometimes they do. We've heard those stories, but it's kind of like the pep in the step is when it's like, okay, I took that 6 months off or that 3 months off when I retired, and now I'm ready to just something, again, be in complete control of my time. Maybe I'm going to literally take my alarm clock and smash it because I'm done having to get up, things like that. So I think that is just really great. I think we've touched on a lot of great principles. So Matthew, I would just say this: if someone is interested in maybe having you give a second opinion, look at their, wealth and retirement plan to kind of give them a hope and some guide them in their prosperity, what is the best way that they can learn more and then reach out and connect with you?
Great question. So you can go to my website. It's retirewithmatthew.com, retirewithmatthew.com. If you want to learn more about me, you can also reach me if you want to call me. I'll give you my direct line. It's 817-400-4486. Again, that's 817-400-4486. That comes directly to me, and I'll be happy to talk to you about your situation and see how we can help you.
Excellent. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a real pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.